All right, I got 3 topics today. 2 are going to be hot button topics. I'd probably get myself in trouble. I usually do that, but that's okay. I don't mind it anymore. Just part of the show. Part of having an opinion and not being a sheep. The other one's basic. It's going to be Weaver. That's the basic one, but I want to dig into it a little bit because it's so critical. If he goes to the Saints, obviously the defensive coordinator aspect's huge, but there's a more important key factor I want to talk about. Then the first hot button topic is the Twitterverse. There's a very popular and trending talk, and you get lots of clicks if you just follow along. You're not even a Dolphins fan if you hope the Bills beat Kansas City. I got to get into that because fandom, the word fan is fanatic. Fanatics don't think. They just follow. So I don't care what side of the fence you're on, but we got to talk about that a little bit. But then the real meaty one is going to be Tua. Steve Molly was on my show, and he put a graphic up there, and he was reading stuff. Well, he didn't put the graphic up there. He told me about a graphic, and I didn't really get to look over the graphic. So I want to break it down now because there's some stuff there, man, real clear stuff. And it's not to say Steve's point is right or wrong or whatever, but to create clarity. Some people are saying Steve's a bad guy, and I just think that's wrong. He's a nice guy. He's a good guy. You can have whatever opinion you want. I'm all about that free thinking, liberty thing, as long as it doesn't lead to some craziness. So that's what I'm going to get into today, guys. Weaver, get the quick one out of the way, and I'll put the 2 hot ones together. Actually, no, I'll do the hot one first. Tua. Okay, it's always Tua. It's more Tua. I did a podcast yesterday on the offensive line. People really don't want to hear about it. But I'm seeing a resurgence of it's like not that bad of an offensive line. We need help, but it's not that bad last year. I thought it was very good. I put together some real good stuff from 2 viewers that gave me some great information, very solidified. And it shows there's no way. There's no statistical evidence to show that this offensive line was even remotely average. But that's not my point. So Steve put this thing up, and I didn't get to see it, and now I got a chance to look it over and break it down. And this is the graphic that caused much consternation. You can see it right now. So Tua is ranked red line bottom for his progressions. But I'll put the graphic away for a second. But you have to understand this is effect. This is the result. You can't debate these results because it is what it is. It's production. But what's the causality? Far too often I see people trying to evaluate football without causality. Now, my getting in trouble on this podcast a little bit and getting corrected, and I'm going to do that really well, is there's certain things you don't know about football. And these little pieces, they play out big, and you can talk about the effect of it, but it always goes back to causality. So why? It's always the why. If you're not understanding the why, then the causality, you can't really determine the why. You got to understand the why in football all the time. That's my strength. The brother that commented me, he played professional football. I was tryouts for the team. I think he made like spring, like preseason or something like that. But he played Division I. The guy knows way more about coverages. It's going to be very interesting when we get into that. But what I think my strength is the why, the macro, the philosophical, the conceptual, because all that stuff drives all these little particulars down at the bottom. And so we see this graph. I'll put it back up again. And he's redlining. You can't say he's not. But why? Why? And so I'm not going to get to the exact why from Tua because Tua is still a little bit of an enigma. But if you watch that podcast I did on the offensive line, you know it sucks. Sucks. Not average, not decent. Sucks. There's no evidence to support that. But when you look at the numbers, Steve, who said he's not an expert, he just looked at the red line final numbers and didn't parse it out. That 18.8% in a purple circle is designated receiver. So it would be very easy to say, well, Tua, he just needs designated receivers. He throws to these designated targets, and it's because he can't do anything else. Well, maybe, but a certain factor is being left out of this, and this is a huge weight to that red line. He had the most screens in football, 20% last year. Most of the top quarterbacks are throwing like 10. And you could say, well, they decided to add more screens because he sucks. Well, two factors. Why do you throw screens? Why are screens in the game? Screens are in the game to offset pressure for the most part. It's meant mostly to take advantage of a blitz. Because when a guy blitzes, you got the extra guys coming in and you throw it over and then you got the numbers. But our offensive line sucks. We were the least blitz team in the league. And so just from a basic conception, not in a total, but in a majority, you're supposed to throw screens. Remember, Patriots used to do it all the time. They'd throw the screen at the blitz at the perfect time. You get beat, and then you got the numbers and you get big plays. But if you're not getting blitzed, why are you throwing so many screens? And for me, it would go back to the vast information, starting, not totally, this offensive line sucks. But when you add in 20% screens, that's a designated target. And so what portion of that to this 18%? And if Tua in 2022 threw 6% screens, and it was his best season. So he can throw without screens. He had his most successful season with about 6%. Now he ballooned to 20. Now, if you've watched me, last year I was one of the only, or maybe the first, or whatever, close to the top of the rank, telling you that, hey man, you notice we're throwing lots more screens midway through the season. What happened midway through the season? Key offensive linemen went down. McDaniel started going to the screen to offset things, to kind of stretch this thing out and then try to get some work at the edge because we had speed guys. And in 23, it went to 15%, and that's where it wasn't that way the first part of the season. They were kind of lower, and then they started migrating higher and higher. And this season, without Hunt, without a healthy Connor, even if you like Brewer, it went to 20%. We had Liam Eichenberg and Jones and Lamb. Don't think that's a reason to call lots of screens. Now, I'm not taking Tua out of the equation saying he's the greatest thing. I'm just saying designated target would be screen. We call a vast amount, and the rationale for that is because of pressure. And without the blitzing, that leaves one scratching their head and pointing only to one thing. This offensive line isn't able to do its work, and McDaniel had to offset that pressure. So if you get the least percentage, you get the most screens, then when you're outside those designated targets, let's say, we're not going to say all of them, like the pocket posts and things like that, but the screens, then you're seeing the most DBs in coverage. And that's not what you want. Especially, as I've been saying for a while, high leverage in the box from the linebackers, crazy high leverage, and then cover two all day. Now, we did drop our play actions, and we put more guys in routes than usual. I think it was in 22, we had like 40% play actions or something. It was a crazy number. And so you're keeping more blockers, and you put more less receivers out, but he was blitzed a lot more then too. So this offensive line isn't the total reason for everything, but the drive to screens inflated this designated receiver target to some degree, a semi-largeable degree. Now, if you go to checkdowns, 17.5 is the second highest. So he's got the highest screens, the most designated targets, second most in checkdowns. But why do you check down? You check down because your options are bogged down. You don't see anybody and you check it down. But how did they play? Is they played over coverage, too high safety, and mostly 7 guys dropping. This is a rationale to talk about a solid piece of why he checked down. And so these checkdowns at 17% and 18% for designated targets makes a huge pool. Again, I keep saying, I don't know if Tua can do what he needs to do if everything is right. but I know everything is not right. I know we threw tons of screens. I know they're supposed to be used for blitzes. We weren't blitzes. He checked down a lot, but because we're not being blitzed a lot, he's got stacked secondaries. And so, you go back, and here's a little thing towards the positive. If you're a Tua fan, second read options was 12th highest. Now, if you're looking at a pool of numbers from 100% of all his throws, and he's still at 12th at your second read, but then he's got the most screens, the most designated throws, and some of them are to help him. Some of them are part of the design. We notice, but not all of them. And if you look at the checkdowns and him still being at 12th place, it says something that he's not totally inept. I'm not saying he's Drew Brees or he's Peyton Manning, whatever. But what I'm saying is these numbers, that big red line, is really driven by two high things. But to show that he's not totally inept, to have the 12th placing in that second read with all these ugly, weighty things on the side. And yes, some of the designated target is for him and this offense. Although I'll say that it also helps McDaniel a ton. If you've got to get there and you've got to have audible packages and you've got to do more adjustments, we have a system that gets the ball in late because it's long verbiage or whatever, and we have to do all this motion. And there's no audible system. That helps the OC out a ton. Again, I got to keep saying it. It's not to pull the blame off Tua, because we don't fully know, but there is heavy anchors around him. If they're released, we got to see what happens. But this is not a aggressive offense. This is not a quarterback-friendly offense. Oh, it is in a way because he gets the ball out and he gets high completion percentage, but it's not a way to really attack a defense, and it's not a way to put up big numbers. But in 2022 and 2023, it was a little bit different. Although halfway through 23, we started morphing into what we're seeing here. And so this graph by Steve is effect. It's fact. It's stats. But the causality, you can't fully determine that. I don't think Tua is super great. And if you took the injury off the table, I'd be more inclined. If you took mobility and put it on a table more, I'd be more inclined. If you could throw to deep outs and he had a gun, I'd be more inclined. But this framework is what I've talked about for years, is not conducive to success. I'll say one last time, defenses, they leave the interior open. They guard the edges. They guard the middle, and they play the top. And if you can't throw to deep outs and you can't run inside, it puts heavy weights on his potential to being successful. So that's it. Take it for what you want. Steve's a great guy. I don't think he really examined it this way. But I think if I sat down with him, he would understand a little bit more. Not fully agree, but you just got to have some sense of like rationality. Oh yeah, I still don't like the kid, but I know that's not really setting him up for success. And we don't do that here. We never do that here. Ask Tannehill. Ask loads of people. So that's that. I'm going to do something nice now so I can get off the hot seat for a second. Weaver. Yeah, I like him as a defensive coordinator. But the main thing is, guys, we don't have discipline. And if you're pulling Calais Campbell off this team, I mean, if Calais Campbell's walking around the locker room, people respect him and fear him. He's a giant, and he's going to be a Hall of Famer, and he's been around forever. That's a big piece for even people who still going to do their own thing. They're going to be minding their P's and Q's a little bit more. And Weaver, when you see Weaver, he's a little bit of a nice guy. I think he's a little bit of a tough guy. He's a former player. Both these guys set the table for players minding their P's and Q's, or even better, adopting the right approach to take. Now, we were still a disaster with these two guys, but just imagine if we went into the season the way it was with Mr. Loosey-Goosey, whoever you want to call it, at DC. Maybe you want to say Boyer was loosey-goosey, we'll say him. And then no Calais Campbell. This thing could have been a Chateau disaster of far larger proportions. And so for me, beyond the DC aspect, it's the leadership. Leadership is critical. We always talk about leadership. And so it would be disaster. Now, Aaron Glenn left the Jets. They said they weren't going to let him out of the building. He got out of the building. I'm hoping the Jets screw it up like usual. And then he goes to the Saints. Glenn goes to the Saints. But it still can get done. I think Salah, yeah, whatever the guy's name, the Jets coach, yes, Salah. I guess I can't remember his name right now. He was, he left for a little while and came back and be the head coach. So Glenn could easily go back to be the Jets head coach, or he can go someplace else, maybe the Saints or something else. But at least it gives us a crack. But I don't like that Weaver's in the final running. I think he's got a hot track if Glenn's not in play, and it would be very huge disaster for us. And people are predicting not a good season next year. Without Weaver, it was going to be hard for us to find both a quality leader and a quality DC at this stage, because a lot of the good pieces are getting pulled off. We're kind of late to the party. So the last part, I don't want to knock anybody. Everybody has the right to, and I prefer they think for themselves, and they have differing opinions. But I'm hoping the Bills beat KC, and I'm a bad fan. I want them to lose a Super Bowl. Now, if you're telling me you're a bad Dolphin fan, if you're rooting for the Bills in the Super Bowl, I would say, okay, yeah, I get that. But there's no way I want the Dolphins in their prime years of the 70s to be a 2-win team to drop down a rung and hear KC at the top for 3 wins. And I don't want to hear another cycle of football for KC. Hey, if you want to be a bad guy, you could say, I'm rooting for the Bills to win and I hope to lose a Super Bowl so they can have 5 Super Bowl losses, if you want to be nasty about it. I don't really care about the 5 Super Bowl losses for them. I just don't want them to get a ring because I don't want to hear about it. Anyway, from Tommy from Mafia Sports Report. But I am certainly, I'm not a fanatic. You want to say I'm not a fan of the Dolphins? If you mean total blind fanatic, you know how many people called me a blind fanatic and a bad fan when I was telling them their offensive line sucks, or telling them Ross isn't a good owner, or telling them Greer was a bad guy? How many people told me that? Because I'm not a fan. I love my team, but I'm not a fan. I don't check my brain at the door. I don't do that for anything. Nothing. So if you want to say I'm a bad fan, that's okay. Still have lunch with me and stop by and watch my videos. Okay, whatever, if that's what you want. But also know this, that if you're in the content creation business and you say what I'm saying, you're in a minority and you're not getting your clicks. You're not feeding the red meat to your Twitter followers or your subscribers. Maybe you feel that way. I'm not saying they don't feel that way, but it's an easier road. But I know some people are doing it. Ride the wagon, get more clicks, subs. Hate the Bills. You might. That's okay. I don't hate anybody anymore, except for maybe the Patriots and a little bit of the Jets. A little bit of 49ers. But the Bills, yeah, they foiled me in the 90s, but they got their due by losing the Super Bowl. I know a lot of Bills fans, they're nice. But I really don't. This game is a game. And it's just, for me, the biggest problem is another thing for Dolphin fans to battle it. We don't need that. We don't need another reason to argue with each other. We got Tua, we got Greer, we got the offensive line, we got Ross, we've got all that stuff. We don't need another reason. It's tiring. It was so fun being a fan in the 80s and 90s, and somebody said, well, they didn't have Twitter back then. Probably better off. But we were all mostly in agreement. It was nice. I want that again. And I just think that this, you could believe it, and I don't think you're a bad guy for it. Just don't tell me I'm a bad fan. You can tell me I'm a bad fan. I'm a bad fanatic. I'm a bad brainless wonder. I love this team. I've been watching this team longer than most of the guys out there saying I'm a bad fan for wanting the Bills to win. Not the Super Bowl, but beat them KC. Chiefs, yeah. But I've been doing this since 78. I cried to Super Bowls. I wept when Dan Marino left. I've been here along the way. And I've been telling you facts you didn't want to hear because I am not a fanatic. I'm not here, Deb, McDaniel's the greatest thing. Flores is totally evil. How many people tell you that? The fans. And were they right? No. Oh, offensive line. We can do all this stuff. It's really good. I'm sorry, Butch Barry. I'm sorry, Liam Eichenberg. Those are the fans. How does it feel to get hoodwinked? And I'm not saying they did it on purpose to be bad, but when you become a fanatic, you check your brain at the door and you can't. This team needs people who love the team but aren't fanatics, because the media department in the Dolphins organization controls the fanatics. They've got the second largest media department, and they use these platforms to direct. We need people who love the Dolphins enough to say, that's ridiculous. No, I don't believe that. Let me see it. A little Missouri, show me. So, I don't know. Guys, if you want Bills to lose, good. If you want them to win, just don't want them to win the Super Bowl. That's the only line I get to. So that's my 3 topics for today. I'm going to get back to my mea culpa tomorrow. I just want to dial it in right, because he offered such complex stuff in the minutia, and I don't mean small, like not valuable, but like real deep stuff that it's out of my league in a way. So I got to process it. And I also got to say, hey, I screwed up, and I got to tell you, and I got to show you what the truth is. So that'll be tomorrow, the next day, or something like that. So that's it, guys. Please like, subscribe, comment, view, all that stuff. Curtis saying, be well, go Phins. Curtis out.